and our opposition to this, as we have put so powerfully, anti-people policy on education of this government, which they are trying to impose on the whole country. And I'm speaking, of course, on behalf of the Catholic Church, of the Christian community. हमारे 40,000 से 1 लाख तक हमारे educational institutions are of various types, and if this policy, which is so much against the minorities, if this is implemented, certainly it will definitely affect adversely the selfless and dedicated service to the field of education, which the Christian community has been rendering for all these years. And because our constitution is secular, our country is secular, and the secular nature and framework of our constitution, which has been established ever since the independence of our country, if this kind of policies are implemented, will certainly destroy the secular and peaceful fabric of our nation. Therefore, I appeal to all our political leaders to oppose this. और हम यहाँ आए हैं, we are a peaceful people. We have demonstrated democratically because we live in a democratic country, and we have done this. We have already registered our protest in different ways from different quarters, and now we are demonstrating also here, and we will do so. And I expect all our leaders like Shri Digvijay Singh and so on to speak up in Parliament and speak strongly against this policy which is out to divide the country on the basis of majority, minority, the poor and the rich, and to make education a monopoly of the rich, as you have seen, the Dalit and the non-Dalit, and so on and so forth. Agar a policy aage chale, then our nation will be divided, and this should not be allowed to happen.
First and foremost, I express our heartfelt unity and our support from our Supreme Leader, our Honorable Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, Dr. Purachi Talvi Amma. She has expressed her fullest support for this genuine cause of fighting against the communalization in the field of education, against the national education policy. Many have got different opinions, but to be very precise, I know that religion and education is different. We should not involve, or we should not bring religion into education.
Now I am standing before you on a different issue, that is the new educational policy. You must understand that we have a very challenging time. Ever since BJP came to power, the RSS has come to the center stage of politics. It is dictating what Modi government has to do or it should not do. It is RSS which dictates the new education policy, also dictated by RSS. In fact, verbatim, they are lifting what is said in RSS documents. And this is an issue on which Communist Party of India and all other parties are agitating. In the last session of the Parliament, we raised this issue. Parliament should debate. Parliament should discuss this. A discussion was allowed, but discussion was not concluded. It remains inconclusive. What are the issues raised? The new education policy tries to restructure the entire approach, the entire education system in our country. For instance, it talks about Gurukul system which was in existence during Vedic times. It talks about bringing speaking Sanskrit as a primary language in the field of education. It talks about various other things. That is why we have been accusing this policy. This policy is based on centralization, commercialization and communalization. But the educational policy in a country like India should be based on secularism, social justice and scientific temper. This is what we have been insisting. So there was debate in the parliament. Finally, Mr. Javadekar got up. He did not reply, but he simply said, whatever you find on the MHRD website, it is not a draft policy. It is not draft at all. They are just inputs. They are just inputs. Based on the inputs, government will formulate the policy. Later on, Mr. Javadekar, Prakash Javadekar, he convened an interactive session with parliament members. But many parliament members could not participate in that session. I understand some 40 members participated in the interactive session. Just before I came here, just a few minutes before I left Parliament, I had a chance to speak to Mr. Prakash Javadekar. I told him, I am going to Parliament seat. I am going to speak before the activists. What do you want me to say? Really, do you have a policy? I said. He said, Mr. Raja, you can very well tell. It is not a policy. He says, I do not know how far we can trust him or we cannot trust him. But he says, it is not a policy. It is not a draft policy. I have asked all the stakeholders to give inputs. Then the government will formulate the policy.
is a very important and vital part in anyone's life, especially a child's life. So it becomes our responsibility, not only as a student organization but as a human being, that we try to protect the Constitution of India, which allows right to education. इस देश के अंदर ऐसी परिस्थितियां पिछले कुछ महीनों में देखने को मिली हैं जो कि इस देश के अंदर एक डर का माहौल, एटमॉस्फेयर ऑफ अ फियर, द गवर्नमेंट and the RSS people are trying to establish certain viewpoint of their own, which they want everyone else to follow. When we talk about education, we should not forget that this education is a great tool of transformation for students from marginalized section. दलित छात्र, माइनॉरिटी छात्र, पिछड़े वर्ग का छात्र और खास तौर पे महिलाएं कहीं ना कहीं इस देश के अंदर ऐसी परिस्थितियां पैदा की जा रही हैं, एक ऐसा ऑर्गेनाइज्ड अनरेस्ट क्रिएट करने की कोशिश की जा रही है। मुझे लगता है कि ये समय है कि हम सबको मिलकर इसकी लड़ाई लड़नी होगी। हमारा पब्लिक एजुकेशन सिस्टम, उसको पूरी तरह से उसकी क्वालिटी को खत्म करने का प्रयास हो रहा है। It is an assault on the autonomy of the educational institutions.
हम सब एक मत हैं कि प्राइवेटाइजेशन और कमर्शलाइजेशन का जो मार्च आज नहीं कई साल पहले शुरू हो गया था इस देश में, कि एजुकेशन को प्राइवेटाइज कमर्शलाइज करके विदेशी इंटरेस्ट के हाथों बेच के WTO गैट्स में उसको एक ट्रेडेबल कमोडिटी बना के उसका ऑफर 2005 में सरकार दे चुकी है। और जो उसके बाद कई लगातार जो चेंजेस आए थे कि बजट कम किया जाए हायर एजुकेशन का और हायर एजुकेशन पे एक्सपेंशन ना हो, और किस तरह से डेमोक्रेटिक इंस्टीट्यूशंस को ख़त्म करके जनता की आवाज़ दबाई जाए, इसके खिलाफ हम लड़ते आ रहे हैं। और ये जो नया ड्राफ्ट आया है जो ऑलरेडी इम्प्लीमेंट ग्राउंड पे हो रहा है, ये उसी चीज़ का एक एक्सटेंशन है, उसका एस्केलेशन है, और इसमें कई नई चीज़ें भी जुड़ गई हैं जो बहुत ही खतरनाक हैं। साथियों, मैं ये बताना चाहूँगी कि हम लोग अपने संग जो हमारा जॉइंट संघर्ष चल रहा है कई सालों से, हम इसमें समझ गए, हमारी टीचर समझ गए, छात्र संगठन के साथ मिलके हम लोग लड़ रहे हैं। हम समझ गए हैं कि कई सरकारें जो आई हैं वो इलीट को रिप्रेजेंट करती आई हैं। इट इज़ बीन अनफॉर्चुनेटली सिंस इंडिपेंडेंस we have found, despite having a very good constitution, despite having guiding principles which we should have been following, despite having good laws in many cases, we have found that at the ground level it is a government of the elite, for the elite, by the elite. It is a handful of people who would like to perpetuate their power in this country, have their control over the resources of this country, and hand in glove with the old colonial forces who never really left our country. वो ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी कभी छोड़ के नहीं गई हमें, वो बाहर से निगरानी रखती रही, कंट्रोल करना चाहती थी, और कंट्रोल का बेस्ट मेथड है एजुकेशन को कंट्रोल करो। और पूरी दुनिया में ये चल रहा है कि एजुकेशन को कंट्रोल करके, प्राइवेटाइज करके थॉट कंट्रोल करेंगे और मुनाफाखोरी करेंगे। ये सिर्फ हिंदुस्तान में नहीं हो रहा है, और अनफॉर्चुनेटली हमारी जितनी भी सरकारें हैं घुटने टेक के इनके आगे इन्होंने हमारे देश के इंटरेस्ट बेच दिए हैं। तो एक तरफ हम इन जयचंद सरकारों से लड़ रहे हैं, और दूसरी तरफ वो फोर्सेस जिन्होंने कभी आज़ादी में भाग नहीं लिया, वो फोर्सेस जो पहले भी ब्रिटिश के साथ उन्होंने जो कॉलोनियल मास्टर्स के साथ कोऑपरेट किया और धर्म और ऐसे बेसिस पे लोगों को बांट के हमारी ताकत, हमारी डेमोक्रेटिक यूनाइटेड ताकत कमजोर की। अनफॉर्चुनेटली वही थिंकिंग अब आ गई है कि जनता को डिवाइड कर दो, और जितने भी डेमोक्रेटिक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन हैं, स्टूडेंट यूनियंस हों, टीचर्स एसोसिएशंस हों, उनको सबको खत्म करके, डेमोक्रेटिक रिप्रेजेंटेशन खत्म करके, वो जो मास्टर्स हैं ग्लोबल कॉर्पोरेशन की तरह, उनके ट्यून पे नाचो। एंड द बेस्ट वे इज टू डिवाइड द पीपल। इसलिए आप देखते हैं कि जब स्टूडेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन चाहे वो JNU हो या हैदराबाद सेंट्रल यूनिवर्सिटी हो या अक्रॉस द कंट्री के जो स्टूडेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन हैं, जब ये नॉन नेट फेलोशिप के लिए लड़ रहे थे, फंड कट के खिलाफ लड़ रहे थे और बहुत बड़ी स्टूडेंट मूवमेंट बन रही थी, उसी टाइम पे ये 9 फरवरी का इंसिडेंट जेएनयू में करवाया गया और ये पूरा ये एंटी नेशनल कह के लोगों को आपने पूरा उसको तहस नहस करने की कोशिश की और जो हमारे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल वैल्यूज हैं पूरी तरह से नजरअंदाज करके एक स्टॉर्म ट्रूपर्स की तरह हर यूनिवर्सिटी में कुछ लोगों को भेजा जाता है, मिसगाइडेड यूथ को भेजा जाता है. आई डोंट थिंक एनी स्टूडेंट इज I embrace all students and we always invite all of them for all our discussions and to take a stand. लेकिन misguided youth को इस तरह से ढकेला जाता है हमारी तरफ कि आप इनको अटैक कीजिए, इंडिपेंडेंट थिंकिंग मत होने दीजिए, कल्चरल प्रोग्राम्स मत होने दीजिए, डाइवर्सिटी ना होने दीजिए. ये जो वन कल्चर वन कमांडर, ये वन का जो मोस्ट अथॉरिटेरियन जो टेंडेंसी है वो हम देख रहे हैं जिस तरह से डीमोनेटाइजेशन पे ये अनाउंस करके लोगों की जिंदगी बर्बाद कर दी. साथियों, इस डॉक्यूमेंट में वही इंटरनेशनलाइजेशन ऑफ एजुकेशन, वही स्कूलों को कम करके मर्ज करके तादाद कम करना, उनको बेच देना, वही इन्वेस्टमेंट प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट को इनकरेज करना एजुकेशन में और वही स्किल पे एम्फेसिस देके जो कॉग्निटिव थिंकिंग है, जो आपकी जो नॉलेज बेस है उसको खत्म करके आप इस देश को गुलामी की तरफ बढ़ा रहे हैं. आप एक चीप लेबर तैयार कर रहे हैं.
You have been very patient for so long and I will not test your patience further. Luckily for you, I am not a political leader, I am simply a teacher. So what I have to say to you can be said in very short, 6 or 7 minutes. There is one main reason to oppose especially the higher education policy of the present government and for that matter of the previous government as well. There isn't that much difference between the two governments where the higher education policy is concerned. And this reason is that the future of Indian democracy depends on the future of Indian higher education. Why do I say this? मैं जो कह रहा हूँ वो ये है कि भारतीय लोकतंत्र का भविष्य भारतीय उच्च शिक्षा के भविष्य पर निर्भर है. मैं ऐसा क्यों कह रहा हूं? मैं यह इसलिए कह रहा हूं कि अगर हमारा लोकतंत्र बना रहे, अगर हम चाहते हैं कि हमारा लोकतंत्र बना रहे, तो इसमें कोई दो राय नहीं है कि अमीरों और गरीबों में जो बढ़ता फासला आज हम देख रहे हैं, उस फासले को कम करना है. The reason why the future of our democracy depends on the future of higher education is because in order to protect our democracy, we need to do something to reduce the increasing gap between the rich and the poor. How are we going to do that? To bring the poor up in any significant way, we need to give them access to some significant resource. Are we able to give them land today? No, we are not. In fact, whatever access to land they have is being taken away. Are we able to give them some other resource, some other form of wealth? The redistribution of wealth is not on the agenda of almost every political party today. So that is not going to happen. The only resource for social mobility which we are able to distribute today is access to higher education, because through access to higher education, it is possible for those who are, for the have-nots, to try and improve their situation somewhat. तो मेरा कहना सिर्फ इतना है कि अगर लोकतंत्र को बनाए रखना है और उसके लिए हमें अमीरों और गरीबों के फासले को कम करना है, तो इस फासले को हम किस जरिए कम करेंगे? वह कौन सा संसाधन है जो हम गरीबों को दे सकते हैं जिसके सहारे वो अपनी आर्थिक स्थिति को बेहतर कर सकें? क्या हम जमीन बांटने की स्थिति में हैं आज? कतई नहीं. जो रही सही जमीन गरीबों के पास है वो भी उनसे छिन रही है. क्या हम दौलत बांटने की अवस्था में हैं? दौलत बांटना तो आज लगभग हर राजनीतिक दल के कार्यक्रम में है ही नहीं. तो कुल मिलाकर उच्च शिक्षा ही एकमात्र ऐसा संसाधन है जिसके जरिए गरीब अपनी स्थिति को, जो आज गरीब है, वो कल उसकी ये अपेक्षा हो सकती है, आशा हो सकती है कि वो कल कुछ कम गरीब हो, अपनी आर्थिक स्थिति को बढ़ा सके, बेहतर कर सके. तो इसीलिए हमारे लोकतंत्र का भविष्य हमारे उच्च शिक्षा के भविष्य पर टिका हुआ है। तो इसमें अगर हम चाहते हैं कि उच्च शिक्षा में और लोग आएं, अलग तरह के लोग आएं जो अब तक उससे बाहर रहे हैं, तो इसके लिए हमें कुछ कदम उठाने पड़ेंगे। एक तरफ तो उच्च शिक्षा का विस्तार करना होगा, इसे बढ़ाना होगा, इसके दायरे को बढ़ाना होगा, और दूसरी तरफ हमें यह देखना होगा कि जो नए तरह के लोग आ रहे हैं, जो वंचित लोग इस क्षेत्र में अभी आ रहे हैं, उनके लिए हमारे पास कोई खास कार्यक्रम हो जिससे कि उन्हें हम केवल दाखिले न दें बल्कि हम शिक्षा दें।
Actually, we are living in a country where this Achhe Din government is running from Delhi, but unfortunately it is controlled from Nagpur. We are living in a country of Achhe Din, where this Achhe Din government has a bad habit of launching surgical strike in every sphere of our life, from monitoring policy to the rights of the farmers, to the rights of the workers. Even they started surgical strike in the universities, in the premier universities of our country. You saw in the recent past, they just want to destroy the thought process of our country. That is why they are trying to attack the premier institutions from JNU to HCU and everywhere. But this is the problem of this Achhe Din Raj. And this Achhe Din Raj, you see that the policies they adapted, they are trying to adapt these policies through the new education policies. The policies they just try to widen the gap between rich and poor. And where we as an organization, our SFI, demanding this work for everyone and education for everyone, but they are not going to implement these types of policies. So we are fighting, but we can fight this alone. When our country, our workers, our farmers of our country are being attacked by this government, the policies by this government.
साथियों, आज 17 नवंबर का दिन है और आज जब हम यहाँ इस आंदोलन के लिए, इस कार्रवाई के लिए आ रहे थे, तो हमें याद आ रहा था इसी दिन इसी वक्त पिछले साल 2015 में करतार सिंह सरावा को याद करते हुए हम लोगों ने 100वीं शहादत दिवस पर एक मार्च निकाला था, और वो मार्च था शिक्षा को WTO के हवाले करने के खिलाफ में। और इसी जगह पर पुलिस ने बर्बर लाठियां चलाई थी हमारे साथियों पर। दर्जनों साथी का सर फटा था, हाथ टूटा था और ये सड़क लहूलुहान हुई थी। और यहीं पर प्रोफेसर अनिल सतगोपाल, जो देश के जाने माने शिक्षाविद हैं, उनके साथ भी बदतमीजी की गई थी, उनके साथ में भी धक्का मुक्की की गई थी। और उन्होंने एक कविता लिखी थी कि भगत सिंह और करतार सिंह सरावा के तस्वीर को लेकर जब विद्यार्थी शिक्षा की बात कर रहे हैं, जब समाज की बात कर रहे हैं, जब इस देश के हितों की बात कर रहे हैं, तो आज उसी देश की पुलिस जिनके बल पर यह देश आजाद हुआ, उसी देश की पुलिस ऐसे तस्वीरों को रौंद रही है, ऐसे तस्वीरों पर लाठियां चला रही है। उन्होंने एक कविता लिखी थी उस डेट को याद करते हुए। और आज फिर वो मौका मिला कि उस 17 नवंबर 2015 की जो बर्बर कार्रवाई थी उसकी निंदा करें, और उस निंदा ही न करें, वो जो लड़ाई हम लोगों ने बना रखी थी, चला रखी थी, शिक्षा के निजीकरण के खिलाफ में, शिक्षा के व्यवसायीकरण के खिलाफ में, शिक्षा के सांप्रदायिकरण के खिलाफ में, उस लड़ाई को आगे बढ़ाते हुए आज हम सब जो यहाँ एकजुट हुए हैं, आप तमाम साथियों को सलाम करें, अपना अभिनंदन करें, इसलिए हम यहाँ पहुंचे हैं।
சரியாக 2 மணித்துளிகள் மாத்திரமே கொடுக்கப்பட்ட சூழல்ல உங்க முன்னாடி நிக்கிறேன். ஆங்கிலத்துல பேசணுமா தமிழ்ல பேசணுமான்ற ஒரு குழப்பம் வேறு. ஆனாலும் கூட முதல்ல தமிழ்ல பேசணும்ங்கிறதா என்னுடைய விருப்பம். டெல்லியில தமிழ்ல பேசணும்னா எவ்வளவு மகிழ்ச்சியா இருக்கும் அப்படின்ட்டு. இந்த போராட்டத்துல மாற்றுத்திறனாளிகள் சம்பந்தமாக வந்திருக்கக்கூடிய இந்த புதிய கல்விக் கொள்கை முற்றிலுமாக முதல் தொடக்கத்திலிருந்து ஆதி அந்தம் வரைக்கும் நாங்கள் நிராகரிக்கிறோம். காரணம் என்னன்னா, எங்களுடைய விஷயங்கள்ல நாங்கள் அல்லாமல் எதுவும் இல்லை அப்படிங்கிற ஒரு
This is not a meeting or a gathering to create awareness about NEP, but we have a message to you, Mr. Modi. We have a lesson to you, RSS. That syllabus was designed by Thandai Periyar, and that was taught to Rajaji in 1952 and 1938. when he imposed Hindi on us, and he tried to impose hereditary based, Varna based education system on us. He was thrown away from his regime. Rajaji, this is not a new education policy. We know that this is Varna education policy, Varnashama policy. This is your Vedic policy. We know that. We deny that. We reject that.
அனைத்து மக்களுக்கும் என்னுடைய ஆதி தமிழர் கட்சியின் சார்பாக நெஞ்சார்ந்த வாழ்த்துக்களை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். ஒடுக்கப்பட்ட மக்களிலும் ஒடுக்கப்பட்ட மக்களாக இருக்கின்ற, இன்றைக்கும் மலத்தை கைகளால் அள்ளி சுமக்கின்ற, செருப்பு தைத்து கொண்டிருக்கின்ற கடைக்கோடி சமூகத்திலிருந்து
government finally to concede that there will be a public debate and a discussion, and before that the policy will not be finalized. So that was finally forced by them, and then the minister had to, in response to the debate there, he's still very, poor minister is very annoyed that he has not been given a full chance to reply to the debate. But that was, it was good because we didn't want a reply. We wanted him to withdraw this as a policy document. It's only a discussion paper. Those discussions are going on. Many of you have participated in the electronic, space, cyberspace in responding to it. So virtually this policy document or an input or whatever they call it, it is for all practical purposes a withdrawn document. I mean, this is not going to be the basis on which we will allow them to formulate anything further. We will fight, but you know how the way this government functions, so they may try to force their way, which is what they are doing in most of the things and most of the policy areas. But as far as we are concerned, from the CPIM and the left, I can assure you, you see, there's a fundamental philosophy of what should be the education policy of a country. And the fact that this particular document has been a lift of an RSS document, I mean, all that I said in the parliament, and all of you know, I mean, that is not something, there's no need for us to repeat all those issues. We all know that the objective of an education policy has to be the objective of what India stands for, or what is our character as an independent country. The character of India is defined in our constitution, where the four fundamental pillars that define the Indian Constitution and the Indian Republic are: one, secular democracy; second, economic self-reliance; third, federalism; and fourth, social justice. These four fundamental pillars on which the Indian Republic stands, the education policy must reflect each one of these pillars. Any education policy that undermines any one aspect of these four pillars is something that is not acceptable to us, and that is something we shall fight to ensure that that is not undermined. Now, that is precisely what the RSS wants to change, and the BJP is only the political arm of the RSS, all of us know. And this government is only acting in order to change the character and the foundations of the Indian education. Whatever we have achieved so far, very inadequate. Much more should have been done in the field of Indian education. But even in spite of those inadequacies, whatever little is left of adherence to these four fundamental pillars of our republic, even that is sought to be undermined. All of us are aware of that. The struggle is, the fight is to ensure that that is not allowed to happen. They want to change the character of the Indian Republic from a secular democratic Republic of India to a theocratic Hindu Rashtra of the RSS variety of what the RSS wants it. And in doing so, all of the four pillars that I spoke to you of our republic will get undermined. So that is why when we talk of secular democracy, we talk of the fact that the education system must be a democratic system, must be a scientific system, must be based on the values enshrined by the principles of secular democracy as defined in our constitution, and that character of education cannot be removed. When we talk of economic self-reliance, we talk of an education policy that is mostly, if not fully, but mostly overwhelmingly state-funded, which means opposing privatization and commercialization and opening of all these education shops, which are basically profit-making shops that have been opened up all over the place, mushrooming in every state in the name of technical education, higher education, etc., etc., that it should be state-funded and it will have to be based on a universal access to school education, and that is why the neighborhood schools and the school in every habitation, which is what the Kothari Commission and all of them also recommended, I mean that has to be put in place, which would mean adequate financing for that, and which is what all of us have always been demanding, a 6% allocation of our GDP for education, in order to ensure that you have first this universal school education. And no country in the world, and that is what we are trying to explain to them in the parliament, but because of their political objectives they don't seem to understand or even learn, no developed country in the world has become a developed country without a universal state-funded school education system. Even today, if any one of you go, many of our relations must be there, settled as NRIs in the USA or in the UK, etc. When you go there, depending on the place where you are living, your child has to go to the school in that neighborhood, unless of course you are so rich that you afford a private education. But otherwise, you will have to, by law, go to your neighborhood school. And that is what breeds also this question of intermingling of various religions, various castes, various things, which is the essence of your social justice. Once you have universal access, there is no question of any struggle over the percentage of reservations. Once everybody gets admission to a universal access for school education, then the meaning of reservations itself ceases to exist. So social justice can come in our country only through universality. And that is why the first demand that we all, I think, should make is for adequate funding of education, that is 6%, building the character of the future of India, that is our own children, giving them universal access to school education, based on the character that is enshrined in our constitution in terms of its secular democratic foundations, whereby equality, what our constitution says, irrespective of caste, creed or sex. I am quoting, this is the constitution's fundamental right. That equality must be provided in education for all. That is a fundamental premise. So any new education policy will have to be based on this premise. And it is from this premise that the content of That education we can discuss what should be there, we can discuss and go into all those nuances. But I think that is the essence that we'll have to safeguard. And that is the essence now today under assault. And that is the essence that is now today coming in terms of Vedic mathematics, or in terms of your, whatever you call that, which is there in their, this thing, a Brahmanical education system, whereby it's inequality that is bred and not equality. So that is why, keeping the state's rights in mind, different languages, different cultures, each state will have in its own syllabi a certain element of that that necessarily and should be reflected. And that is why the principle of federalism, social justice and equal access, and then your economic self-reliance that is state-funded, and again this privatization, commercialization, that should be the basic parameters, what we have said in Parliament, what we are fighting for. So let us see what is the new draft that they are going to bring. The Minister has said now that their consultations are ending. I don't know what he means by ending, but let us see. There's been one 2-day long workshop he's held in the Parliament, where various NGOs were invited, various inputs have come. He's promised to share all these things with us as members of parliament, but it's not happened yet. But we will put the pressure. But I can only assure you finally that as long as we are there in the parliament, and we will be there, the CPM on the left, and as long as we are there in the parliament, this is something, these fundamental principles that I've said are something that we are not going to compromise with. On this there is no compromise. That is the need for India as we know of it, and for the future of India, for the training and the character building of our children. So that is why I can assure you that on all these issues, we'll take up the issue in the parliament, and we shall continue to fight inside. You will continue to fight outside. We'll join you in fighting outside. And I wish someday you'll also join us in fighting inside when you come there and do it. But only remember, only when these two hands meet, that the sound of the clap can be louder to make this the deaf government here. So the struggles on the streets and the struggles inside the parliament. So let us together ensure that our country, our future and our children's future is not ruined by this sort of a communal exercise and interference over our education system.